Acts 5 starts off with one of the craziest stories in all of the Bible. Acts 4 ends with this radical generosity ideology. Basically, everyone in the church is selling everything and giving all of their funds to the apostles to give out to those for whatever they need. And Acts 5 starts off with the man named Ananias and his wife Sapphira, who sold a piece of property and were supposed to give all of the proceeds to the church. But look at what it says in verse 2. And with his wife's knowledge, he kept back for himself some of the proceeds and brought only a part of it and laid it at the apostles' feet. And look at what Peter says in verse 3. But Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back for yourself part of the proceeds of the land? Don't miss it. Peter knew that Ananias didn't bring the full amount of proceeds by the power of the Holy Spirit. And look at what part of verse 4 says. Why is it that you have contrived this deed in your heart? You have not lied to man, but to God. I want to make sure you don't miss this. The sin that he committed actually started in his heart. That's why Proverbs 4:23 and the NIV version says this: above all else, guard your heart, for everything that you do flows from it. So you're probably wondering, why is this one of the craziest stories in the Bible? Well, look at what happens immediately after Peter says these words to Ananias. Verse 5 says this: when Ananias heard these words, he fell down and breathed his last, and great fear came upon all who heard it. So Ananias literally died right after this. Alright, but what about his wife? Well, long story short, about 3 hours later, Sapphira comes in and has no idea what's happened. Peter basically says, have you sold the property for X amount of money? Giving her the false number that Ananias represented. And she says, yes, that's exactly what we sold it for, knowing that her husband had held some back. And look at what Peter says in verse 9. But Peter said to her, how is it that you have agreed together to test the Spirit of the Lord? Behold, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out. And then she immediately falls and takes her last breath. And what I got out of this passage was this: God looks at your heart and wants to make sure that your actions are actually lining up with your words, because he knows the damage of hypocrisy. We all know that people claim to live a life that's supposed to honor God, but they don't actually follow through with their actions. And that's what Ananias and Sapphira did. They wanted the recognition and to be a part of this church's radical generosity while not actually being radically generous. I pray this video helps you understand the importance of guarding your heart from the enemy and encourages you to have open and honest conversation with God. The only reason they withheld some proceeds for themselves is to make sure that they could get their needs met, meaning they didn't truly trust God to provide for them, which God has the patience for them to doubt, because the disciples had so much doubt in their hearts and they literally walked with Jesus, but God still forgave and accepted them. So I pray this video puts it into perspective how important it is to have open and honest dialogue with God, and don't lie to the Holy Spirit, because remember, the Holy Spirit is God. So invite him into your doubts and watch him move in your life. And I will see you tomorrow for day 6, where we will learn just a little bit more about who the Holy Spirit is, why his power matters, and how it applies to you. God bless.